Podcast. I am your host, Wesley Bear, and so today, I don't know what episode we're doing. I never seem to know what episode we're on, but today we're doing the African giant land snail. So, it's a snail, meaning it is in the family of mollusks, and of course, it has a shell. But, this will be an overall description of the giant African land snail, but a pretty good indication of what snails are like overall. So, there will be a few differences from maybe another snail we do in the future, but this is just the emblematic species we're going to use to talk about snails in general. So, the African giant land snail does stand apart in one aspect, which of course it is giant. It is about 8 inches long and about 4 inches in diameter, so it's bigger than some mammals and some birds. Pretty big animal with a pretty large shell. But, and of course, the giant African land snail lives pretty much in the region of Africa, East Africa, from about Mozambique in the south to Kenya in the north. Living in a tropical warm climate that most snails do. And while it is native to Africa, has been introduced into a number of regions, including here in the United States. Back in the 30s, it was introduced into Hawaii, and then in the 60s actually made landfall here on the continental United States, and has been introduced into a number of regions, making it an invasive species, which we will talk more about at the end. But some overall other general facts, like most snails, giant African land snails are detritivores, meaning they tend to eat anything that is decayed. Usually this includes fruit and vegetable matter and plants. Young snails will tend to feed on softer foods like bananas or beets, while the more mature, older adults will feed on things like cucumbers and living plants, particularly hard grasses. The other thing to note about snails in general is they are also what are known as hermaphrodites, meaning there is both male and female genes within a snail. So that means they can reproduce with another male or another female, and it doesn't really matter. It all kind of depends on the situation, regional variance, weather temperatures, age, and those can vary throughout the snail's entire lifetime. Now, unlike some other hermaphrodites, they do need a partner in order to mate and to lay eggs. So they at least need another one of their kind. The snails will tend to mate in deep soil, and these mating rituals will tend to take place at night, as like most snails, African land snails are nocturnal. There's very little communication involved in these displays, but what little there is not displayed through what we think is the usual ways that animals communicate, such as sound or smell. Most of this is through body movement or head movement and even eye movement, as snails have those big eye sockets that we tend to see that stick out on either side, and they also have in most snails, mandibles or almost like lower tentacles that are used for touch and feel. So definitely not a lot of communication, but there are ways in which they're able to sense one another and get a feel of when their other snail is ready to mate. So after laying about 100 to 500 eggs, those eggs will develop for a short period and then they will hatch. Unlike some other species, there is no larval stage, and so they're pretty much mini adults when they're born, and they grow and mature until they're about mature overall in about 6 months. Some other important things to note is, like a lot of snails, they also produce a slime-like mucus that allows them to travel easily, especially over rough terrain such as rocky areas, drier environments. Though, in drier environments where the weather is not so hot and moist, most of these snails will tend to bury themselves in the soil and hibernate for at least a short period of time until the weather improves. The African land snail is one of the most well-known species of snail in the world, and this is due to the fact that it has become a highly invasive species and a pest in a number of regions. Despite having a number of enemies such as rats, crabs, and even some other species of snails, African land snails, as I mentioned earlier, have been introduced into a number of areas and have caused a number of major problems. Now, while some cultures also do eat snails, most of the side effects of snails being introduced into these areas has had a massive downward trajectory in terms of environmental issues. The two major issues are that African land snails will pretty much eat anything they can get their grubby little feet on, and so they tend to do huge damage to crops and crop production, costing millions each year and depriving millions across the world of food. They also produce what is known as parasitic environment to grow. So they host a number of parasites on them that tend to be very actually deadly and sickening to humans. In fact, these parasites are often fatal if they come in human contact. So while most African land snails are not particularly intent on doing damage, just the fact of how they live and in the conditions they live attract a number of problems. So always be aware of snails, especially if you live in the south, in southern regions here in North America, or in particularly tropical warm environments, that you know which snail species lives in your area, because those some of those species are native and are meant to live there, while quite a few, especially the African land snail, tend to be very prominent in many urban environments and have caused all this damage and wrecks. So be aware of which snail species are supposed to be living in your area and report any invasive species to your local or state wildlife agency. So there you are, the giant African land snail, and an introduction to snails in general. Again, you are welcome to learn more about me through my YouTube channel, which is Crazy Creatures Caricatures, which is the way you're probably listening to this right now. And then you can get both of my books on Amazon, which are The Crazy Creatures of Oz Meet the Colorful Animals of Australia, and then Crazy Creatures of the Ocean, Shocking Sharks and Radical Rays. I will be posting a little bit of a preview of both books, so you guys can get more of an introduction to those books and what they look like if you're interested. And yeah, so please enjoy nature and enjoy drawing. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to share in the comments. And if you have any advice on how to improve the podcast, or just talk about animals in general in the comments down below, and get to interact with you on a bit more level, that would be great. So enjoy nature, enjoy drawing, and God bless.